David Grusch Part 2 then. For years, discussions surrounding unidentified anomalous phenomena had lived on the fringes of public life. Now, apparently, these discussions were about to enter official records of the United States Congress, and I cannot understate that, I'll tell you, right? David Grusch arrived quietly, no entourage, no dramatic entrance, just another witness walking through the same corridors countless others have crossed before him. Yet, unlike most witnesses, millions of people around the world already knew his name. Some believed he was about to confirm decades of speculation. Me personally. Others expected another chapter and a story built more about rumours than evidence. And I was expecting that too. Nobody knew exactly what would happen. Grusch took his seat. The room settled. There came a moment that would define everything which followed. He raised his right hand and swore an oath to tell the truth. It was a simple gesture, one performed countless times inside hearing rooms across America. Yet in that instant, the conversation changed. There was no longer an interview, no longer a podcast, no longer a newspaper article quoting unnamed sources. This was sworn testimony before elected representatives. Every answer will become part of the congressional record. Every word will be examined, not only by politicians, by intelligence officials, journalists, scientists, military personnel, and millions of ordinary people watching around the world. The hearing began, as many do, with background, questions about Grusch's military career, his work within the intelligence community, his assignments, his responsibilities. Members of Congress wanted the public to understand who this man was before asking why they should listen to him. The picture emerged was not of a lifelong UFO enthusiast, and that is really important. It was of an intelligence officer whose career had unfolded almost entirely within the structures of American national security. Only did the questions become more direct. Representative after representative returned to the same subject. Had David Grusch discovered? He answered carefully, never hurried, never theatrical. Throughout the hearing, one feature of his testimony remained remarkably consistent. He distinguished between information he had personally handled during his official duties and information provided to him by individuals he regarded as credible first-hand witnesses, and we discussed that last week. That distinction mattered. He was not claiming to have personally walked through a hangar containing recovered crafts. He was explaining what multiple officials had reported to him while he carried out what he says were official investigative responsibilities. So let's go through that again. He was not claiming to have personally walked through a hangar. He is not claiming to have seen these aliens or these spacecrafts himself personally. He was explaining what multiple officials have reported to him. So in his job investigating this subject, multiple officials had said that they had seen something. Right now, supporters argued that the carefully distinction reflected intellectual honesty. Critics responded that sincerity alone could not substitute for independently verified evidence. It can if you get loads of witnesses, can't it? Now, if you're in court and 12 witnesses said that they saw a bloke mug someone, that bloke's going down. So, sincere, verifiable witnesses can make a case, can't they? Now, both interpretations will become part of the public debate. Then came the exchange that would dominate headlines across the globe. A member of Congress asked whether the United States government possessed crafts of non-human origin. Big question. So Grusch paused briefly, then replied that based upon the information provided to him by numerous individuals during his investigation, he believed such programs existed. And within minutes, News organisations around the realm were reporting these words. But then another question soon followed, and this is mind-blowing, that one that would generate even greater attention. Had biological material also been recovered? Grusch answered that he had been informed of the recovery of what he described as non-human biologicals. The phrase spread with astonishing speed. Television broadcasters repeated it. Newspapers placed it on the front pages. Social media exploded with debate. For supporters, it appeared to be one of the most extraordinary statements ever made before Congress concerning unidentified phenomena, because it is massive. For skeptics, it immediately raised a different question. It's the only question they've got in their arsenal. Where was the evidence? It is here that precision becomes essential. Grusch did not, and I'll repeat that, did not testify that he had personally examined biological remains. He testified that individuals connected with the alleged programs had conveyed that information to him, and I totally 100% believe that. That distinction remained one of the most defining features of his testimony. As the hearing continued, lawmakers asked whether additional information could be provided privately, like specific names, specific locations, specific programs. Grusch replied that he could discuss certain matters in a classified setting, but not during a public hearing. And we all understand that, national security. Now, for some members of Congress, the answer was sufficient. It suggested that the public hearing represented only part of a much larger conversation, one that might continue behind secure doors. David Grusch was not alone that day. Now this is important, right? So David Grusch was not alone that day. Now we've already discussed that Grusch had not seen stuff personally, right? Seated beside him were two former Navy aviators whose experiences had already attracted public attention. Commander David Fravor spoke about his encounter with the now famous Tic Tac object during training exercises off the California coast. Ryan Graves described repeated reports from military pilots encountering unidentified objects operating within restricted airspace. Their testimony differed from Grusch's, obviously. Fravor and Graves spoke primarily from their direct operational experiences. As we said before, Grusch spoke as an intelligence officer, describing information gathered during an official investigation. But together, their testimony painted a broader picture. Pilots reported unusual encounters. Intelligence officials asked difficult questions. Lawmakers demanded greater oversight, and by the time the hearing concluded, no classified documents had been released. No recovered material had been displayed. No scientific mystery had been solved. Yet, something undeniably significant had happened. For perhaps the first time in generation, the discussion had moved beyond whispers, beyond late-night radio programs, beyond internet forums, and into the formal record of the United States Congress. UFOs have been talked about on record of the United States Congress. That's mind-blowing. As a person my age, mate, that is staggering. Now, as journalists packed away their cameras and the hearing room slowly emptied, one thing became clear. Whatever people believed before that day, the conversation had changed. David Grusch had not proven his allegations before the world. I don't think you can. Nor has his testimony ended the debate, because it will never go away. Instead, he had done something perhaps more important. He had persuaded many people that the questions themselves, do UFOs exist, deserve to be taken seriously. And for me, that is fantastic, right? I honestly believe the UFOs. If you watch my channel, you knew how enthusiastic I am about the UFO subject, and that is mad. Now, as he left the Capitol, another chapter was already beginning, because once the hearing ended and the interviews began, and away from the time limits of Congress, David Grusch would have the opportunity to explain his story in far greater detail. Now, the hearing was over, of course it was. The microphones had been switched off. The committee room stood empty. Chairs were pushed back beneath polished wooden desks. Television crews dismantled their equipment, and within hours, the world, as it does, had moved on to the next headline, or so it seemed, because behind the walls of Congress, the real conversation was only just beginning. In the days that followed, millions of people searched for a single name, David Grusch. Who was he? What had he really said? And perhaps more importantly, what had he meant? For those questions, the brief exchange of a congressional hearing was never going to be enough. Soon, David Grusch began appearing on long-form interviews where he could explain his position in far more greater detail. And among the most widely watched were his conversation with investigative journalist Ross Coulthart. And I'll play a bit of it, okay? Unlike Congress, there was no strict time limit, no 5-minute question periods, no interruptions from committee members, only long, thoughtful discussions that allow Grusch to explain how he believed he had reached his conclusions. Now, throughout those interviews, only one theme appeared again and again. Grusch insisted that his objective was never to convince the public simply by asking them to believe him. Instead, he argued that the appropriate authorities should be allowed to examine the information he believed existed. His message remained remarkably consistent. If the allegations were false, they should be investigated and dismissed through proper oversight. If they were true, then Congress and ultimately the public deserved to know. That position resonated with many people. Now, whether they accepted his conclusions or not, as the interview continued, Grusch spoke in greater detail about the extraordinary level of compartmentalization he believed surrounded the alleged program. We spoke about that last week, didn't he? He described an intelligence system designed so that no single individual would necessarily understand the whole picture. And as a national security point of view, that is really important. If someone gets abducted by a foreign agency, and sort of like, should we say, pushed to talk, they don't know the full picture. That is really important. Each person performs a task. Each team completes an assignment. Each project remains isolated from the next. To Grusch, this explained how information could remain hidden for decades without requiring thousands of people to keep exactly the same secret. He also returned to a phrase that captured the imagination of audiences around the world. And if you know me, I'm a little bit... my speech isn't great, right? Now, I'm reading this as ontological shock. It is an unusual expression, one borrowed from philosophers rather than scientists. In simple terms, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this, it describes the profound psychological impact that can occur when a deeply held understanding of reality is challenged. Now, Grusch suggested that if humanity were ever confronted with evidence of non-human intelligence, the consequences would extend far beyond science. Governments would be affected. Religious beliefs might be questioned. Have you seen Disclosure yet? Have you seen the movie? I personally thought it was amazing. And religious beliefs might be questioned. That was part of the film, wasn't it? History itself would require re-examination. Whether such a scenario will ever arise remains entirely unknown, but the discussion itself reveals something important. Grusch was not simply talking about unidentified objects. He was asking how civilization might respond if one of the oldest assumptions proved incomplete. And if you're a fan of my channel, you know that I have already got that assumption. As interest grew, so did the debate. Supporters pointed to his military service, his intelligence career, his willingness to testify under oath, and the fact that he first used protocol, legal channels before speaking publicly. That's important. To them, they were the actions of someone acting of duty rather than personal gain. Others, of course, remained unconvinced. Scientists emphasise that extraordinary claims require publicly testable evidence. That's something they always use, right? And we will never get that evidence because the government don't want you to know. That's as simple as that. Journalists asked whether the unnamed sources who spoke to Grusch could have been mistaken. Government officials, including representatives of the Pentagon and later public reporting from the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, stated they had not found verified evidence supporting the existence of secret programs involving recovered non-human technology. And we will go back to decompartmentalization. That's why they're not finding it. One person might not necessarily know what the other person's up to. So there you go, right? The gap between allegation and public verification remained, and it always will do. Yet regardless of where people stood, something had undeniably changed. The conversation had moved, not towards certainty, but towards seriousness. Questions, and this is really important, right? Questions that once attracted ridicule were now being discussed inside governmental committees, universities, scientific organisations, and major newsrooms. Former military personnel who had remained silent for years began speaking more openly. Pilots described encounters that they had previously avoided discussing. Members of Congress from different political parties continue pressing for greater transparency. Whether all these developments were connected directly to David Grusch is a matter of perspective, but few would dispute that his testimony became one of the defining moments in the modern discussion surrounding unidentified and aerial phenomena, or I'm going to call it UFOs. History will eventually judge the significance of these allegations. Perhaps future investigations will uncover evidence supporting the claims. No, they won't. No, they won't. Perhaps they will not. No, they won't. Perhaps classified records will one day be released, and they are being released now, aren't they? Trump is releasing them as we speak. Perhaps some will remain sealed for generations. Today, no one can honestly say how this story ends, but perhaps that is precisely why it matters. The greatest investigations are really remembered because every question was answered. They are remembered because someone had the courage to ask questions that others were unwilling to ask or too scared to ask. David Grusch stepped into the world of the most scrutinised public arenas in the world and placed his reputation behind what he believed to be true. You can't argue with that. Whether history remembers him as a whistleblower who exposed hidden realities, or as a man whose allegation could never be publicly substantiated, will depend upon evidence that is yet to emerge. Until then, the debate continues, the hearings continue, the investigations continue, the witnesses continue to speak, and somewhere behind the headlines, behind the speculation, behind the classified files, the truth, whatever it may be, continues to wait. Now, history has a habit of revealing its greatest secrets slowly, sometimes over years, sometimes over generation, and ever so often someone comes along who changes the direction of the search. Perhaps David Grusch is one of those people. So, what do you think? What do you think? Do you believe in David Grusch? As I say, I had someone on my YouTube channel who quite rightly thinks David Grusch is a stooge. Now, I am always sitting on the fence when it comes to governmental stuff. I don't trust the government. I don't. Did David Grusch work for the government? Have they told him to go out and say this stuff? I don't know why they would. All I care about is that the UFO subject is getting out there. It's getting aired and it's getting talked about publicly. You will never get everyone to believe it, ever. There will always be skeptics. The UFOs could land in the White House, right outside, and someone would go, that's Bluebeam. So So yeah, it's a very difficult subject. I'm just glad that the UFO subject is making headlines. All right, well look, this was UFO aliens and weird stuff. Really appreciate you sticking to the end. Please like, subscribe to my YouTube channel, ding that notification bell, give me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.